Let's take you back to that presidential climate change summit unfolding in Pretoria. The president has taken to the podium. Let's listen in.
Energy, electricity, and authoritativeness in inviting the president, Dr. Ramaphosa, Deputy Minister of Finance, Dr. David Masondo, ministers and deputy ministers here present, ambassadors and high commissioners who are also honoring us by being present at this occasion, and representatives of various multilateral institutions and other development partners who are also continuing to walk this journey with us, and representatives of the South African Local Government Association, and indeed representatives. As I look around this audience, I see a number of people from business, from industry and civil society, and members of the Presidential Climate Commission who are also here present, and delegates and guests and ladies and gentlemen. It's really a pleasure and a joy to be here with you, particularly as you have heard from Minister Ramaphosa following on our Government of National Unity first Cabinet Lekgotla, where we met together, all of us parties that constitute that Government of National Unity as the executive of our nation, to strategize and to talk about where to for our beautiful country, South Africa, in the 7th administration. Now, this Climate Resilience Symposium is taking place at a time when we are witnessing firsthand almost our extreme vulnerability to the impact of changing climate around our own country and in our sub-region. The storms that have hit the parts of Western Cape over the past week have caused enormous devastation to homes, to communities, to businesses, and to infrastructure. These adverse weather conditions temporarily brought container ship traffic to a complete halt at the port of Cape Town when we could least afford it, as we are rebuilding our capacity in as far as making our ports more efficient and effective. Rough seas resulted in cargo vessels losing containers overboard and others being extensively damaged. Now, the port of Cape Town is the country's second largest container terminal, and in the wake of what's been happening in the northern part of our continent, in the Suez Canal and all that, many countries and companies have been redirecting their cargo or their vessels right around the Cape, and this weather impact has been quite negative for us. And although Cape Town handles a variety of cargo, the biggest exports from the port are agricultural products, as many of you would know. Having perishable agricultural products stuck in the port or in transit for an extended period results in losses for exporters. This in turn impacts on the agricultural sector in our country, and given its impact or importance on our economy, there is a knock-on effect on the economy as a whole. This is just one illustration of the fact that climate change is as much an economic issue as it is a scientific, a social justice, a human rights, and a developmental issue. It has a direct and material impact on the activity across our economy and affects lives and affects businesses. Disruptions caused by climate change increase the cost of doing business. It undermines competitiveness and also dampens our prospects for increased employment. These disruptions result in lower tax revenue, of course, and increased expenditure on disaster relief, also on health care, as people who get injured have to be taken care of from a health point of view, and also the social support for affected communities, and this is where it matters most also. These extreme weather conditions cause damage to infrastructure like roads, like bridges, like railways and power lines and ports, but they also cause enormous damage to homes, the devastation of homes, and particularly in vulnerable communities where their homes are made out of tin, cardboard, or very, very flimsy material. And this is where we feel, and our people feel, the effect much more acutely. The resultant strain on public finances then necessitates the reallocation of funds from other essential services. To manage the higher expenditure and lower revenues, government may then need to increase borrowing and find ways of finding more money, and this in many ways leads to higher debt levels and interest payments. This limits government's ability to invest in other critical areas, and you can already see the impact of climate change as we have to deal with it, which we must. The National Treasury, therefore, is central to our response to both the shocks of climate change and the potential opportunities to use this just transition as a springboard or as an enabler to build a more inclusive, resilient, and sustainable economy. And I do want to commend Minister of Finance and Deputy Minister of Finance, and indeed the National Treasury team, for convening this symposium, together with the Presidential Climate Commission and other partners, and also the brand new Minister of Electricity and Energy in his reconfigured portfolio, so that he can become more authoritative himself as he deals with all these matters. So this symposium will focus on the integration of climate goals into macro, fiscal, and finance policy, and mainstreaming climate change considerations into the intergovernmental fiscal system. It is society's most vulnerable who bear the brunt of climate change, because as ordinary people who usually have very limited resources and who often live very close to the brink of their own financial capability, who suffer the most because they have limited means to prepare for, they have limited means to cope with, and to recover from climate-related adverse effects. Imagine in your mind a family whose home is damaged, who, as they look at how the floods have an impact on their home or in their community, see the entire furniture of the home just being washed down the flood plain or the flooded river. And it basically means all their possessions are gone. So they are the ones who are most affected. Not saying that businesses are not affected, but we need to look at this through the prism just of ordinary people as well. Just as it is the countries of the global south that feel the effects of climate change most, despite being least responsible historically for global emissions, it is critical that we strengthen systems for adaptation and mitigation and build resilience in communities and accelerate our decarbonization effects and the pace of the just energy transition. The reality that we must confront is that the carbon intensity of our own economy is not sustainable. For decades, our reliance on fossil fuels as a source of energy was in many ways a competitive advantage because it allowed us to produce electricity cheaply, and it also allowed us to industrialize at a very, very fast pace. But the world has changed, and this dependency has come to pose significant risks for us. As the world moves towards greener economies, our trading partners will take measures to ensure that their own climate actions do not undermine their economies. Instruments like the European Union's Carbon Border Adjustment Mechanism, which has the potential to cause great damage to developing country economies, signal the inevitability of carbon pricing in global trading systems. Our emissions-intensive energy system is likely to increasingly undermine our competitiveness in global markets. I have repeatedly said that South Africa will decarbonize at a pace and at a scale that is affordable to our economy and also affordable to our society. If we act fast or act too fast, and fast we must act, but if we act too fast, we risk damaging huge sections of our economy before we have built alternative energy and industrial capabilities. At the same time, not acting now risks our economic stability. So we must act, and we need to act fast, but we need to take into account our own capability of doing so. We must embrace a managed transition to a low-carbon economy, not only to safeguard our people and our environment, but to ensure our own economic resilience and growth. We are, in reality, facing a climate challenge of emergency proportions. Indecision and slow action are not an option for us. We must act decisively and swiftly to mitigate the effects of climate change and ensure that we do have a just transition for all South Africans. We must pursue a green industrial agenda that will create jobs and grow the economy. But in doing so, we must be wise. We must open our minds and our eyes to the many opportunities that are given rise by this green transition. Investments in green infrastructure, renewable energy, and climate adaptation measures can be costly, and they can require, and they do require rather, careful financial planning and prioritization. That is why we have prioritized inclusive growth. We are hard at work implementing the urgent reforms that are needed to lift growth, economic growth that is, and to pursue a fiscal strategy that protects the sustainability of our public finances. Operation Vulindlela has been an extremely successful partnership between the National Treasury and the Presidency, and a wide range of government departments. And this is where we have seen intergovernment work at its best, where we have succeeded in breaking down silos that are always inherent in government, and where working together we have been able to achieve a great deal. This project has enabled significant reforms in areas such as energy, and we continue to see the progress that is being made as a result of the initiatives that we have taken together in water, in telecommunications, and now in transport, making our economy more competitive and increasing our productive capacity. And what we have been doing in Operation Vulindlela has been widely welcomed by everyone. Our strategy involves preparing ourselves to withstand the economic risks that are posed by climate change while taking full advantage of the opportunities that are given rise to by the energy transition. And this is no easy balance in the end. South Africa aims to reach net zero emissions by 2050. Our revised nationally determined contribution balances our developmental needs and economic realities. It takes into account the feasibility of undertaking a climate response through a set of just transition pathways. Importantly, it notes carbon tax as a vital component of our mitigation strategy to lower greenhouse gas emissions. By internalizing the cost of carbon emissions, the carbon tax incentivizes companies to reduce their own carbon footprint and invest in cleaner technologies. And it is pleasing that a number of companies are taking this up to good effect. The carbon tax also generates revenue for climate initiatives that we embark upon. And these funds can be reinvested in renewable energy projects, energy efficiency programs, and social support mechanisms that we need to put in place as part of the climate transition or just transition. We have launched a number of other initiatives to meet our emissions targets. The Renewable Energy Independent Power Producer Procurement Program has been a great success, attracting over 209 billion rand in investment and adding much needed capacity to our electricity grid. The Integrated Resource Plan, which outlines our country's energy mix, is in the process of being updated. And I'm glad and pleased to know that discussions are going on around this IRP, and I'm hoping that we can finalize it. And as a government, we are very proud of the processes that we involve ourselves in and involve our people in through their various organizations, that we are able to put either a policy out there and have it thoroughly discussed, whereafter we then find a solution that incorporates the wisdom that will have come out of the consultation process. And that is what the IRP process is about. It sets out a viable energy mix over the medium and long term to achieve our decarbonization objectives. The Just Energy Transition Investment Plan sets out a quantified investment plan of some $98 billion. I did a quick calculation as I was coming, and with the exchange rate movement, it seemed to amount to 1.7 trillion rand investment. And now this will drive huge investments in the electricity grid, in green hydrogen, in electric vehicles, economic diversification, skills development, and many others, including the social aspect, so that the just transition that we are talking about must have real meaning to the people of our country so that no one is left behind. We continue to explore opportunities to meet our emissions reduction targets in minerals extraction, in green hydrogen production, in new power infrastructure, in vehicles that are driven by electricity, that is electric vehicles, in manufacturing and economic infrastructure upgrades. It is crucial that the transition to a low-carbon economy is, in the end, just and inclusive, and that no worker and no community should feel that it's left behind. And this may well be a contested area, and contested it must be. And this is where we do need to take care that we consult people, we consult workers, and we consult communities, particularly in areas that are in energy generation precincts, so that as we migrate to a just transition, they must see that it is indeed just. And our process must not be theoretical or just technical. It must be real. And ordinary people must feel that they are included and they are part of it all. And of course, we do have a wonderful disease in South Africa, and that disease is that people want to be consulted. It's a wonderful disease. We must be consulted. People no longer want to be taken for granted, no longer want to have things done for them without them being involved. And it is in climate change interventions that we do need to be extremely careful and be patient and hold thousands and thousands of meetings with ordinary people, talking to them, so that they too feel that they are part of the solution. And this is the South African way. The growth of clean tech, renewable energy, battery storage, green hydrogen, and minerals for the future low-carbon economy must result in opportunities for affected sectors, for affected workers, and for affected communities. We are investing in retraining programs, creating new job opportunities in renewable energy, and supporting small enterprises in affected areas. And these efforts must also be taken up with transparency, with directness and honesty, so that those who are players in the small and medium enterprise sector must have a sense that they too are going to get opportunities which will enable them to support their livelihoods, but also to contribute to economic growth. Climate finance is crucial for our transition. We need substantial investments to build sustainable infrastructure, to develop green technologies, and support social programs. One looks, for example, at the issue of disaster funding, where there is a substantial gap between available disaster funds and the cost of disaster response. Even as we have taken proactive measures, like setting up the Climate Change Response Fund, we need to think seriously about the urgent financial and policy measures that are needed to address these shocks and how to strengthen the National Treasury's disaster financing response. The Department of Forestry, Fisheries and the Environment is already working with the Presidential Climate Commission on recommendations for Climate Change Response Fund and an Adaptation and Resilience Investment Plan to accompany it. mitigation and adaptation financing is a challenge. And we call on our international partners to fulfill their commitments to finance both. They often stand at great platforms in the world, and they make pronouncements on commitments. And we in the Global South, who suffer the most from the effects of climate change, most of which originates from those developed economies that caused the greater part of the climate change that we are suffering. But they never fulfill and follow up on their commitments. And when they do so either late, and they do so in very complicated measures. And we therefore call upon them to live up to the commitments that they continue to make. We have already seen the positive steps with the establishment of the Green Climate Fund, the Loss and Damage Fund, and other global mechanisms. So we are seeing some progress, but we want to see faster progress. However, we need more innovative financing solutions that mobilize private capital and incentivize sustainable practices. The National Treasury's climate finance strategy is pivotal in this regard, outlining how we can leverage public and private finance to achieve our climate goals. We must not underestimate the importance of our own domestic capital and financial markets to innovatively mobilize and deploy capital towards our just transition. In fact, we invite our own local markets to be responsive and to be innovative. The Just Energy Transition Funding Platform will be launched in the next few months. It will be an important precursor to a broader just transition financing mechanism, proposals for which are being developed by the Presidential Climate Commission. We call on South African business to invest in the projects that are needed for a successful just transition in this country. And I call upon them even more so now that we've now arrived at a new era for our country, an era of great confidence, an era where many South Africans are seeing great potential for our country moving forward with the establishment of the Government of National Unity. If ever there was a time to invest much more positively and confidently, this is the time. We need to use blended finance to unlock private sector flows. International development finance institutions and governments of the global north that made financial pledges under the Paris Agreement and COP26 are important sources of cheap and concessional capital. To access this and other funding, we need a credible project pipeline. We need to work with all sectors of government, with communities and with business as well, to create new manufacturing, mining, agriculture, and service opportunities for our country and our people. The science of climate change is complex. So too are the economic, technological, the social, ecological, and political implications of all this. Nonetheless, climate action is an imperative. And it is an imperative because it is all out there for us to see that we've got to act, and we must act now. This requires collaborative efforts between government, business, communities, labor, civil society, and indeed our international partners. If we work together, if we understand the risks, and if we appreciate the urgency we can make our country truly climate resilient. And in doing so, we can build a sustainable future for generations to come. We have been able in the past to overcome many challenges. And this is one more challenge that we can overcome as South Africans. So I'm really delighted that people who've been brought together here are what I would call the brains trust of being able to deal with the climate change challenge that we face. And I hope that you'll be able to make your inputs and your contributions with great courage and with great wisdom. So I look forward to the wisdom that you are going to impart to everyone else during this process. As I look at all of you, I see great wisdom in your eyes. There's not a single pair of eyes that I look at and I see dumb people. So sitting here are really clever people, and I look forward to hearing what you're going to say. Thank you very much.